Welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Const. So what will it take to rid us of Governor Andrew Cuomo? He said again today, he is not resigning. We have to follow the facts, he said. Wait for the facts, weigh the facts.
As I've told New Yorkers many times, there are facts and then there are opinions. And I've always separated the two. When I do briefings, I put out the facts and then I offer my opinions. But they are two different concepts. Politicians who don't know a single fact, but yet form a conclusion and an opinion are, in my opinion, reckless and dangerous. The people of New York should not have confidence in a politician who takes the position without knowing any facts or substance. That, my friends, is politics at its worst. Politicians take positions for all sorts of reasons, including political expediency and bowing to pressure. But people know the difference between playing politics, bowing to cancel culture, and the truth. People know the difference between playing politics, bowing to cancel culture, and the truth.
This would be funny if it wasn't so preposterous. A guy who mangled and twisted facts for years to serve his interests and protect his regime is now telling you, us, that we should follow the facts. Seriously. Okay, so let's break this down. Cuomo clings to the wreckage of his administration. He says he won't resign and wants to wait for the facts. The cynics, which when it comes to Cuomo include most of us, say he's stalling, hoping this will blow over. But the truth is that the investigations now underway are at least as likely to make things even worse for him. And I'm not even just talking about the two investigations with Attorney General Tish James. There are more. The feds. There's an investigation, a police investigation in Albany, raised the possibility of criminal behavior, touching, not just talking, in his sexual harassment scandals. Time may really not be on his side right now. Much of the state's congressional delegation today called on Governor Cuomo to resign. They said Cuomo had lost the power to govern. That is political shorthand for, I am not wasting another ounce of political capital on you, Mr. Governor. Those calling on him to quit included AOC and arguably the most powerful member of the delegation in New York, Representative Jerry Nadler, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, who just weeks ago led the impeachment of Donald Trump for fostering an insurrection. You are not that far from seeing an impeachment in Albany. Just the idea is stunning when you first think about it. The Democratic-controlled assembly in Albany impeaching the governor of their own party. That would be a true way to say it if the Assembly's Democratic Party was Cuomo's party, but it isn't. Cuomo's party is the Cuomo Party, which confusingly in New York State is the New York State Democratic Party. His people are part of that party, but dozens and dozens of democratically elected state lawmakers who ran on the Democratic line are not part of the New York State Democratic Party, which is actually just Cuomo's party. Cuomo's got his machine, and there's other machines being built on the outside. Confusing, I know. All for one, that one is Andrew Cuomo. You can rule by inspiring loyalty, or you can rule by invoking fear. And Cuomo chose fear, and now he has little precious loyalty to save him. As announced by the Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, the Assembly is preparing to lead the first impeachment of a New York State governor in 108 years. The only governor to ever be impeached was William Sulzer, who was impeached and convicted of pocketing campaign contributions. Now, think about this. How bad did it have to get to impeach a New York lawmaker for corruption? Just think about that for a second. But Sulzer's political offense was that he actually broke with his benefactors at Tammany Hall by ordering an inquiry into highway contracts. In other words, Sulzer was punished for his disloyalty, a prophetic signal to Andrew Cuomo, who may soon wish he had tried building loyalty instead of fear. That's what's to come. And I just want to kind of break down what could happen. We are in the middle of budget time. We're starting budget time. In 2 weeks, Governor Cuomo is supposed to present his budget to Albany, to the legislature. This is always a very toxic time in Albany. If he were to resign before then, suddenly that budget process would be taken over by the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul. I think Governor Cuomo is using the power of the budget negotiations and the control of the budget as a tool, as a mechanism to have control over the situation. It will send Albany, whether people want to actually deal with Governor Cuomo or not in this budget crisis, because it is a budget crisis, whether they want to deal with him or not, it would send Albany into a frenzy, into absolute chaos if he had to resign in the middle of budget time and Kathy Hochul had to take over. I think some people would think, oh, it's going to be easier to get things pushed through with Kathy Hochul because she doesn't have, frankly, the experience of running a budget in New York State. But, be careful what you ask for. Sometimes it's good to know what you're getting into with Andrew Cuomo and how to barter than not. But I don't know. I mean, these are big questions. These are the underlying issues that are at hand right now. And it's not just about him resigning. Some people are saying that the assembly moving forward on impeachment is actually a delay tactic to prevent him from stepping down. And part of that is because you have many assembly members who support Governor Cuomo, many who do not. You still have some Republicans in the assembly and some Republicans more so in the Senate who are going to feed on a moment in which Governor Cuomo, if he steps down, suddenly all the different, everybody who wants something is going to come forward preying on this budget. And just keep in mind, the economy in New York is not doing great. There's a lot of resources needed to rebuild roads, to rebuild the subway, to fund our schools, which are notoriously and illegally underfunded, public schools. There is conversation about a wealth tax on the rich. Of course, real estate is always at play here. And then there's the nursing home scandal, which does play into how things are funded in the state of New York. So it'll be very interesting to see if he makes it through. I think he makes it through because folks want to be able to work through this budget in an effective way. But you don't know. We don't know. And also, there are plenty of people who want to run for governor. And would it be better to run against Andrew Cuomo next time or in an open seat if he were to resign? Or would it be better to run against Kathy Hochul? And, be careful what you ask for because, she could very well be somebody that people like, a refresh eye. Who knows? Who knows? There are a lot of factors here. But we will keep covering them because things are happening very quickly. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm so excited. Our dear friend Harry Siegel, he's an editor for the Daily Beast. He's a columnist for the New York Daily News, and he's the co-host of FAQ NYC. It's a great podcast on New York City politics. I don't know how he has time to do all this stuff, but and read all those books behind him. Do you ever sit there and think how do all these writers, how do all these journalists, they don't read these books that they're getting? Harry, you're on a mute, just as a heads up.
So the Daily Beast gets review books. I'm naturally a hoarder, so the combination has not been so healthy.
I get books too, and we have this thing. We have a book club now, which was a crazy idea for me because it just gives people more work to do. But we're doing. You get a choice of 1 book a month, 2 books, or 4 books a month, and so it's now forcing me to read 4 books a month. Which is bye-bye social life. All right, Harry, so much to discuss. This is our Cuomo show. People have been asking for it. I've been reluctant to do it, basically because I'm scared of him at this point in my life. But I wanted to talk with you more about it because Andrew Cuomo, I think folks, a lot of progressives and maybe even some liberals are starting to understand that Andrew Cuomo is not who he put himself out to be in the mainstream, or at least during the COVID press conferences. But I want to talk with you a little bit more about the Andrew Cuomo before the pandemic. A lot of years there. But let's just start off with, is this Andrew Cuomo's first scandal?
It's his first scandal involving harassing much younger women. Absolutely. In every other set of terms, absolutely not. There's such a laundry list since he was governor, and actually before. Look, Andrew Cuomo is not a great guy. Nobody thinks he's a great guy, but he's been a very powerful guy. And so it's been hard for people to step up and say this at a lot of points. Something he did when he was running for governor last time to match his father's third term is he was running in the primary against Cynthia Nixon. And pretty late in the primary, Cuomo was clearly going to win, was going to win by a lot. They put out this mailer that effectively said Cynthia Nixon is an anti-Semite.
Right.
Now, there's lots of things in life that are subject to interpretation. But we'll start here, and then we'll get to Andrew Cuomo's apologies and attempts to interpret the allegations against him. But there was nothing ambiguous about this. I wasn't a huge Cynthia Nixon fan for other reasons, but this was just
and this was a Democratic Party flyer, just to be clear. It didn't come from Andrew Cuomo himself. It came from the state party.
It came from Andrew Cuomo himself. I'm going to come right to it. It was a disgusting flyer. It was just an absolute lie, smearing his opponent for extremely marginal gain in a contest that he'd already won and won handily. And that's the sort of thing that Andrew Cuomo does. And then he says, that wasn't me. Oh, it was my Democratic Party. It was 3 of my closest aides, but I knew nothing about that. Those are just things that a person who does not think that the rules they set apply to themselves. And that is always the story with Andrew Cuomo. That's the story with JCOPE, the state ethics board that Andrew Cuomo controls, that at various points has tried to look into major lapses with Andrew Cuomo's ethics and has got nowhere with those things. And it's how you end up saying, I passed the nation's strongest harassment laws and founding the Women's Equality Party. Oh, God. Onion headline.
Like the laundry list, guys.
Yeah.
Because of last time, because when he ran, when Zephyr Teachout ran against him, and she received the WFP line, and he was like, "Oh, I'll come up with 2 things at once: the WEP line, the Women's Equality Party, and it's also a women's group, and I'll get a bunch of institutional women to support me." Just as a little bit of recap for folks. But go ahead.
So this is the guy who does those things, and then is talking to 25-year-old staffers about are you interested in sleeping with older men? I'm interested in sleeping with younger women. Here's where I think you should get that tattoo. And now, by the way, when he says we have to wait for an investigation, understand this, he's not denying any of that woman, Charlotte Bennett's allegations at all. He's trying to spin them and say, if anyone misinterpreted the things I said or thought of this as unintentional flirtation, I'm so sorry. How else do you expect someone to take a sad, older, newly single man, sort of creeping up on you and saying, hey, let's talk about your sex life? And then at another point, she says she brought up that she was going to give a talk to college students about a sexual assault that she'd survived. And he does I know this Andrew Cuomo thing, the looks her right in the eyes and just sort of holds it and then talks to her about it, but in this strange and disturbing way, and just sort of keeps repeating the words, you were assaulted, you were raped, and just staring at her. And she said, to me, this was this turning point in the relationship. I think this is important to mention because some of the allegations on certain sets of terms don't amount to that much. You have 3 women have come out now, and the most physical thing you have is a kiss, which Cuomo emphatically denies. Because his legal line.
Of an aide.
Yes, of an aide.
Important to, yeah.
Of an aide who's alone in an office with him and who's not looking to be kissed, which is totally unacceptable. But you could say, what is this? It's a kiss. Or, I've seen people on Twitter and elsewhere, are we going to ban looking at people and stuff like that? But this is, again, the most powerful man in the state doing this to people who work for him, who are not whatsoever interested in this attention, and leaking, and again, not Cuomo, but the Democratic Party, or people want to help him. Come on, Cuomo leaking this first woman who bravely comes out, Lindsey Boylan, her personnel files and being like, everyone knows what a crazy she was. I mean, come on. And all that sort of stuff is very nasty.
There is like the historic context of that in terms of sexism, calling somebody crazy. But, you know, what I find interesting is there had been complaints made. I mean, these women came forward with documentation. You know, the second one, she went to her superior and said, I felt uncomfortable about this. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't going to take down the governor, but there's a paper trail on this stuff.
Right. And he's cornered by that paper trail. So this isn't the biggest sin ever, but he can't really deny all this. Interestingly enough, I was told that as of January, people who were leaving, or early this year, people who were leaving the executive branch when they're leaving, like people who work there, were getting asked, like, do you have anything you want to complain about or report? Because we have a process for that. And I don't know if they'd always done that, but, you know, it seemed notable and I think new and not something you generally get in exit interviews. So I am curious how many more shoes there might be to drop here. But in any case, this is just indefensible, and Cuomo isn't really even trying to defend it. He just wants to show up and say something that has the word apology in it, and then that's the headline the next day, and then move on. And look, you have to do a budget with me, and there's $100 billion here, and I hold most of the cards, right. Legislators. What are you going to do? You know, I win again. And unless another shoe drops, and pending what comes out in this Tish James report, that'll be months and months.
Attorney General. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's unclear what brings him down. But again, there isn't actually all that much to investigate because at least with Charlotte Bennett, there's nothing that Cuomo is actually denying. He's just saying he's a poor old guy and his friends are his work friends, and maybe he doesn't get how the world's changed and he's misunderstood. And it's dishonest and it's gross and it's repulsive to me.
There were so many women, homosexuals out there that were willing to date him, and he had to go for a staffer. No, but I mean, aside from that, I'm not making light to it, but it's disturbing. So let's talk about some of the scandals from pre 2020. I mean, I alluded to this in my opening that Governor Cuomo's inner circle had been investigated. One is sitting in jail right now around this Buffalo Billions scandal. Can you kind of give folks a little bit of? I mean, it seems so far away, but it's really not.
Okay,
So, like, this would take down a governor. Anybody else, they would have gone down for this.
Joe Percoco, who is Cuomo's right-hand guy, was sentenced eventually to 6 years in prison for this. It involves Elon Musk, the Flin Flam monorail man who was going to revive the upstate economy and got lots and lots of benefits and didn't do any of this. There was a Preet Bharara investigation, and depending on which rumor mill you want to go down, either Preet wanted nothing more than to take down Andrew Cuomo, but was just unable to at the end because of very minute letter of the law issues. Again, so it wasn't me. It was just the people closest to me and the honorary, additional Cuomo brother who did it. But I had no idea, or Joe Biden actually pressured Preet to not do so. I have no idea. I'm just repeating rumors in a public setting here. In any case, Joe Percoco, who's been basically a lifelong friend and colleague of Andrew's and of Mario's, when Andrew is advising Mario is a teenager living in Albany and in this cesspool and past the Bear Mountain Compact, where what happens once you drive past Bear Mountain just stays there and frequently involves interns in pornography is between New York and Albany. So as you drive up, that's what's happening. So this is the sort of thing that one would expect to bring a governor down and have some consequences. Alex Perrine had a very smart piece, I thought, in the New Republic, where he said, look, the problem is there's two Cuomos. There's newspaper Cuomo, who's got a super complicated backstory, and you got to get every issue and track it. And there's Percoco, and there's the Preet Pro, and here are the people in his inner circle, and here's what's happening. And you remember this thing from 15 years ago. And then there's TV Cuomo, who's like a man who does stuff in a jacket, who shows up, who's competent, is sort of fatherly, and in the midst of the pandemic, was on TV, sounding very much not like Trump, like a competent, more or less decent person, and fatherly, very purposefully, here are my daughters, let me tell you about them, and also their boyfriends, and share little family stories, but here are the facts you need, and I'm the person respecting the science and giving you the facts, which all comes out differently when you realize that as he's doing that show and performance, that he is trying to sleep with women the age of his daughters, one of whom is trying to get him to go away by noting, hey, I played soccer in junior high school with your daughter. Right. And it's not saying this as a flirtatious thing. It's saying this is a what are you doing, old man thing. And you know, old man just keeps right on going. It's really
disturbing. So
it is.
Okay, one more thing that I want to touch on, just for folks to see, you know, this is like a brief illustration of the mind and creativity and delusion of Governor Cuomo. And I say creativity because he has this way of rebounding and speaking to the cameras and twisting words and all, you know, changing the facts on nursing home deaths, but which we'll get to later. But the IDC. It seems, you know, it was such a big thing that like the fact that we have to remind people what it was. Can you just talk about like how the IDC formed and why and what it was?
I'm going to try to get through that and one other thing in one very deep breath. So we had independent Democrats who split from the Democratic Party to give the Republican Party effective control of the state Senate. So in an overwhelmingly Democratic state, the legislature was still split and Cuomo could be the indispensable middleman. Part of what ended this arrangement was the leader of the IDC, Jeff Klein, went outside of a bar, tried to kiss one of his aides who was not interested in being kissed. Erica Vladimir, who came out and expressed this, and this helped cause Klein to lose his seat, helped draw more attention to what was so ugly about the IDC in a different and maybe more dramatic set of terms, and that balance sort of collapsed, and Democrats retook control. Right about the same time this was happening and that arrangement was finally breaking down, which had been very important to Cuomo, Bob Freeman, right, we're back to newspaper Cuomo now and into the weeds, but I think these are important weeds and they actually get us to the nursing home deaths and sort of covering up public information. Bob Freeman is the powerful state official who basically advises on and has some real control over open records requests. So things that are nominally public, but you can't get to as a reporter without this guy's help. And this guy had a thing where if you were a woman and you wanted his help, he was going to stare at your chest. He was going to touch you. He was going to be creepy around you. And you had to just sort of tolerate this if you wanted to do your job and go back to your editors and say, I got the story for a long time. And so that dam finally broke and a number of women came out and reported this, wrote about it. He was pushed out. And this to me is the intersection of the nursing home scandal that is orders of magnitude larger in certain ways, and the harassment scandal that I'm no way trying to say is itself a small thing, but to me is the connective tissue that the powerful state official in charge of making sure that things that are supposed to be public and that we have access to can be seen was using that power to sexually harass women and more or less extort them for their attention. And I think that there's a nexus there in which people abuse power one way, abuse power in other ways, and you can see the strands coming together.
So fascinating. Harry, I don't think this is a topic that's going away anytime soon, but before we wrap, just real quick, what do you think if there's more information that comes out, more, allegations, how do you think this is going to play out?
I'm not even smart about the past. I know nothing about the future. The one thing I'm confident about is if no more shoes drop, Cuomo is not going to see himself out. And if more shoes drop, he really has no interest in seeing himself out. And there's no sign yet that the legislature, at least, is willing to push him out, that the business community and the people who have sponsored his campaigns and allowed him to be in the dominant position he's in are ready to push him out. So I think we have reached a point where people don't self-regulate with shame because they don't have to. And if you do, you don't do these things in the first place with young women, but you say, oh, wow, this could destroy my career and everything I've worked for. So that part went away, and it went away for a reason. And it seems much more likely to me that he blows through all this. You have to do a budget with him. He's still the governor. People still stand up when he's in the room. And people with longer memory say, do you remember that thing from 2021? Next year as he's running. I really hope that's wrong, but that's my sense at the moment.
Truly fascinating. I think what you're saying about shame is spot on. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. How if they just push through some of these powerful lawmakers, it doesn't stick. Obviously, the state of media doesn't help either. But I'm baffled by how many people came forward and said, "This is not new about Andrew Cuomo."
Ron Kim,
who's up next? Yes.
Yeah, on The View, right, for one day, Cuomo is on TV every day. He left TV for like a week to hide as these allegations came out and just, have statements put out in his name and test how those went. But like, he as long as he stays in power, he gets the last word. If he was to show shame and to walk away, other people would have the last word. And I think that's the one thing he can't accept, unfortunately.
Well said. Harry Siegel, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to have you back on soon. We can talk more about the latest because there's a lot.
Oh boy.
Good summary. All right, everybody, right back after this break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. This is our special New York Cuomo Day. I think we're doing this once a week now. Janice Dean is the senior meteorologist for Fox News, and she is the author of Mostly Sunny and Make Your Own Sunshine. I love that. It's so positive, too. It's
Hi.
like what we need right now. Hi, Janice. How are you? It's been a while.
I know. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. So I really, like, I have to hand it to you. Andrew Cuomo has had so many scandals, very serious scandals over the last, decade and more actually. And they don't seem to stick. So somehow you were able, you did not let down. You kept pushing around this nursing home scandal, which hit you closely. But I just want to start off with why do you think it's sticking right now? I mean, he's like Teflon.
That's a good question. A lot of lawmakers and reporters in Albany called him the Terminator when I first started speaking against him, saying, good luck with that. I think there's enough people standing up now that others feel safe. I feel like, the fact that we've been shouting for 10 months now about the nursing homes, and now we have brave women standing up about his harassment and treatment. And, I have heard from many people that he has been, this has been his MO from day one, just bully, somebody who, exerts his power over people, wants them to feel small. So it's all part of the same package, and I think people are starting to finally feel there's a safe place to stand up and say, we're not going to take this anymore.
So let's talk a little bit about your connection to this story, this nursing home scandal. Your two members of your family passed away in nursing homes in New York. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Sorry, I'm looking over here because I think one of my kids just, hi, I'm doing a live interview. Okay, I'll see you later. Okay.
It's the norm. We got it. Remember in the old days, those moments would go viral, and now it's like everybody's day.
And I said, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this interview on TV and don't come downstairs. And hi, mom, how's it going?
I get dogs.
So forgive me.
It's all good.
Okay. So yes, we lost my husband's parents. They were in separate elder care facilities. We lost his dad first in late March. We didn't even know he was ill, and we were in quarantine. We couldn't see him. He was more sort of advanced with his health conditions than my mother-in-law. And he was in a nursing home / rehab to get him in better health to join my mother-in-law in the assisted living residence. So that was the plan. We had a place close to us on Long Island, and they weren't there for very long either. This is a decision my husband struggled with his sister-in-law for, at least a year. Their health was failing them. We tried to bring aides into their 4-story walk-up in Brooklyn that was rent controlled, and it just wasn't working. So we put him in the nursing home rehab to get him in better shape. And his mom was in the assisted living residence, which she saw, by the way, and agreed to and liked it and knew that they were going to take care of her. And then we got a call late March on the weekend, and the person on the phone said, your father-in-law is not feeling well. And then 3 hours later, we got a call saying he was dead. We didn't know he had COVID, didn't know he was sick, didn't know he was running a fever. We didn't even know that he had died of COVID until after we saw the death certificate.
And were there other people in the facility that also had COVID?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, I mean, we still don't know all the answers. We've tried to get them, but the nursing home hangs up on us. So.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my sister-in-law has been very active in trying to get answers, but
oh my God.
Yeah. There was a red flag after the fact when I remember getting a phone call, my husband getting a phone call saying that they were going to move his dad to another floor so that they could bring more people in, but they never told us they could potentially be infected patients. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So, after he died, and I'm seeing all of these news reports about putting the infected patients into nursing homes and then the cover up of the numbers. My mother-in-law died about 2 weeks later around Easter this time last year. My husband had to tell her that her husband had died. And she got sick in her assisted living facility and was transported to the hospital and died in the hospital. And that was around Easter. So we were going to be vocal about this. My husband's a private person. He is, the last thing he wants is any kind of attention on him or his family. But because we weren't seeing the reports in the news, and instead we were seeing the pandemic prince on television being, crowned like the best thing ever, when it comes to the pandemic. And I saw the reports about the COVID patients and his mandate for 46 days being put into nursing homes. And I saw the reports about not counting those that died in the hospital. And then I saw him on CNN with his brother joking around and laughing. And that was kind of the last straw. When I saw the big cotton swab interview with him and his brother joking around, that's when I said, it's time to tell my story because nobody is going to ask him anything.
When your mother-in-law passed away, was it connected? Do you have any sense of where she was? It just in the facility? Is that how prevalent this was? That every elder care nursing home facility was just, unfortunately, COVID was spreading?
Yeah, I don't know what happened with my mother-in-law. She did complain that people were coming in and out, not washing their hands and that kind of thing. But we'll never know. Yeah. We'll never know.
Unbelievable. So when this all happened and you were seeking answers, was there any sense of like the numbers not being accurate? I mean, where did it go from realizing, because remember we were all watching TV. I mean, I live in Queens. The hospitals were jam-packed. There were trucks on the street, holding bodies in air-conditioned trucks. So it was almost too difficult to process what was happening, to everybody in New York and everywhere, to some very unique cover up. And like, at what point did you realize that what was being projected in the public was not actually was happening in the nursing home and elder care facilities?
Mid-May, when the Daily Caller was the first to report the fact that they were not counting those that died in the hospital.
How did they know?
How did they know? They did their own investigative reporting that the governor and his health department were not counting those that died in the hospital. And then there were press conferences that the governor would have, and that he was questioned on that. And he sort of brushed it off. And for me, it's like, well, if there's a car crash on the highway and the person dies in the hospital, is it a hospital death and it's not a car crash? That's right. What they were essentially doing. So I remember seeing that report. And then from there, I started seeing more reports from the AP, and there were, Albany reporters were doing this. And then when I went and did my first interview on television, I did talk about that my mother-in-law's death does not count because she died in the hospital.
Interesting. Wow. So when you started speaking out, did you demand that Cuomo respond to you? Was there any sort of interaction with the administration?
Early on, I got an email from a friend who knows the family very well. I don't want to give out the name who it was because you'll be like, oh, they know him well. And their email said, I'm really sorry for your loss. This is an incredible fight that you're fighting, and watch your back.
Whoa.
Watch your back. Mm-hmm.
Not as a threat from them, but more like this is what you're going to expect.
This is what you're going to, this is what you're going to deal with. And then when I would do interviews, they would always, Fox would always ask for a response from the governor's office. And Richard Azzopardi a couple of times said, well, yes, his spokesperson would say,
pleasant guy.
Oh, we could have a whole show on that. He would come back with, well, ask her where they died and the date that they died. Like, I don't believe you. Give me some proof.
Wow.
Sort of, let me see their death certificates. So that he said that a couple of times. And then when I think the Daily Mail did a story and asked for a response, he said, well, the last I checked, she's not a credible source on anything except maybe the weather.
Oh my goodness.
So no.
So you don't have a lived experience. You can't share your side of your personal story at all and call for an investigation anyway. Interesting. So has there been pushback? I mean, have they done anything other than, the typical berating?
The typical berating. And, I've heard enough stories from other people. Ron Kim and I know each other. We've known each other for many months now. Mm-hmm. I was actually supposed to speak via Zoom in Albany when they had the nursing home hearings in August. Right. I was supposed to speak and tell my family's story. I was supposed to get an invite on the Friday beforehand. It never came. And then I inquired as to why suddenly I wasn't getting an invitation. And they told me that the Democratic lawmakers were uncomfortable with my appearance, uncomfortable with my story. And so I wrote about that. I wrote an op-ed about that. Why can't I tell my story? I'm a person who has dealt with a tremendous loss and two family members in nursing homes, and I want my voice heard. Mm-hmm. And they tried to sort of make up for it. The Republican lawmakers had a makeshift Zoom session a week or so after that. And Ron Kim was the only Democrat that showed up to hear my story. So, he and I have become close that way. And he had an uncle that died in a nursing home. And I know he's talked to you. And he's been incredibly brave and stood up to this governor. And I think it's pretty well known what he's like, and that this has kind of been his MO from the very beginning.
It's interesting that you say that, because so now there's this dynamic in that August meeting you were talking about. It was the meeting where Melissa DeRosa, his second, she's arguably the second most powerful person in the state, not elected, but she replaced Joe Prococo, the guy who's in prison, just to wrap it around. But Melissa DeRosa and her parents are lobbyists. So Melissa, sort of spoke freely about the numbers, and that's when the story broke open. But that was in August, and there was this period where nothing seemed to, it was just you out there banging the drum, going to the press, courageously doing this. What was it about it coming out recently from that meeting in August? Were there dynamics at play? I mean, I'm also surprised the Republicans didn't jump on board with some of the Democrats. Mm-hmm.
They were trying. I think there were some people that were trying. I almost did give up. It was in December, and there's only so many op-eds I can write by myself. There's only so many times I can go on Fox and Friends or Tucker Carlson and tell my story. And I remember I got a tip from an official at the DOJ. And I thought to myself, well, wow. I'm not an investigative reporter, but I am going to write sort of the opus of op-eds, from the very beginning of how this happened to where we are now with this piece of information that I got from a senior DOJ official, which was, he told me on the record that they had not received any information from the Cuomo administration from October. So basically, the DOJ was investigating Cuomo and they weren't giving them any information. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use that piece of information to write this op-ed. And then Christmas came and I wrote it, and then I published it in January. And I said to my husband, I said, this is probably the last thing I'm going to write because I don't think anything's going to happen to this governor. And then the Tish James report came out, and that was that was like, oh my goodness, and her conducting her own investigation and finding out that the numbers were, 60% less than what was thought to be the real number. So the fact that she released that, a Democrat, and a 76 pager of, they're not telling the real facts when it comes to the numbers. And the March 25th order might have had something to do with the fact that we had close to 15,000 deaths.
Wow. And as of today, do we have a more accurate sense of how many deaths there have been in nursing facilities?
Well, it went from 6,000, which was what the governor was saying for months, when he was going on his book tour.
Right.
He was using false information that whole way through. Like they would, if he was asked the nursing home question, he would say, oh, well, we're 45th out of 50 states when it comes to the nursing homes. Like he was clearly using that false data to make himself look better. And that's why I say his book should be used in a court of law, because it can be used against him. But the fact that she issued that, and now the numbers I believe that they've released are over 15,000 dead.
Jeez.
I actually think it's more. I think it's more.
Probably. Yeah. Now what happens? So there are these two investigations in Attorney General Tish James's office, one involving sexual misconduct. But you mentioned the DOJ. Is that going somewhere? Is there anything else at play?
That's a good question. And that was one of my main reasons for writing the op-ed in January, was to sort of say, please don't let this be brushed under the rug with this new administration. Please don't do that. I'm not sure. The last I heard, I think Jen Psaki mentioned that they were kind of not really paying attention to it, but that was before, the dam broke on all the other stuff. So I think they should probably continue that DOJ investigation. Now we have a federal investigation in Brooklyn that's going on, and an FBI investigation in New York. So two investigations that are based in New York State.
And they're all rooted in this scandal in particular.
Yes, the nursing home scandal. Yep. And the fact that the governor has lawyered up for nursing homes and not the other stuff, leads me to believe that the nursing home issue is a big deal, and he needs to, make sure that he has a lawyer.
Yeah, of course. So that's interesting. What is the FBI's angle on this, and how is it different than the other investigations?
Well, I think FBI is probably more criminal behavior. I'm not, this is not my wheelhouse, but I'm assuming that the FBI is probably more criminal. And if there was obstruction of justice, if there was really criminal behavior going on, like maybe the fact that what I've heard, you mentioned hospital lobbyists, there have been reporting that instead of basing his decision to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes on science, he was basing it on hospital lobbyists and people in the hospital industry saying, we don't want these patients in our hospital. They're not top paying with the Medicaid and Medicare world. And that there might be a money exchange between hospitals and nursing homes. I mean, and this is what Ron Kim has kind of been, flagging, is the fact that there was blanket immunity placed on for nursing homes just a few days after that mandate. Why did he give blanket immunity after that? I call it a death warrant. And there might be a monetary transaction between, putting patients into nursing homes. I heard that they got double the amount if the nursing homes took them. So while nursing homes, a lot of them were raising the alarm saying, we can't take these patients. We just physically can't. if you look at the language of the March 25th order, they kind of didn't have a choice, and they couldn't test them beforehand. They couldn't discriminate. They couldn't discriminate against the patients. They could not test them to see if they had COVID or not.
Unbelievable.
It is.
Janice, I don't know where this is going to go in the next few weeks, days. We have no idea. But is there anything that you wish would still be looked into or that hasn't been addressed involving this crisis?
They have to keep on the nursing home issues. I know that the other stuff is salacious, and no woman should ever be put in a position of, being harassed. Mm-hmm. And it's part of him. It's part of what he's all about. He's about power and intimidation. And I believe these women, I believe them. But it's getting headlines, obviously. And I've always said, whatever makes him resign, I don't think he's going to resign, but whatever puts pressure on him, I'm good with. But don't forget the 15,000 plus seniors that died, and the fact that we know that they covered up the numbers. Like, that in itself, that's criminal.
Right. It's criminal. You're right. We'll see. I don't think he'll resign either unless Biden speaks up. I think that's the only thing.
Yes, I agree. If Biden finally says something like, hey, probably a wise idea to do that. But I think it'll be like he'll be kicking and screaming all the way down.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing how many people have spoken up now. Leadership, assembly leadership, Senate leadership, dozens and dozens of senators, state senators, local lawmakers in New York City, organizations, allies, Tish James, who, he basically recruited to be AG.
Of course.
Talk about because he wanted to get back at Zephyr Teach Out. I mean, it's amazing to see.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see all the puzzle pieces come together. Right. I mean, let's see. Wow. I mean, there is a story here. It's an incredible one. And it's, a lot of it would be Pulitzer Prize winning journalism. I really believe that if people really dig into why this happened and why there was a cover up, I think, it will go down as one of the biggest scandals, certainly in New York State New York State history, but also I think, in the U.S. I think this is just unprecedented. And plus, New
York has a lot of this.
Of course, I know. I'm learning that it's just mind blowing what has been happening in New York State for all of these years. But one other part of this is other governors had almost the identical mandate as Cuomo. Whitmer in Michigan, Wolf in Pennsylvania, New Jersey's Murphy, and even Newsom had almost identical mandates to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes. So there's also the puzzle pieces there. Why? Why did they do that?
It's such a weird decision to make.
It is.
Yes. Thank you for speaking out and not giving up. And hope to have you back on soon so we can discuss what happens post.
Yeah, I know, right? And maybe we'll have a cocktail at some point when all this is over.
In person. I'm down for that.
Okay,
hopefully
good.
It'll be nice outside.
That's right.
Janice Dean, thank you so much for everything, and see you again soon.
Thank
Thanks.
you for your interest. All right.
It's deeply troubling, the specific allegation. The governor called an employee of his, someone who he had power over, called them to a private place, and then sexually assaulted her. Is absolutely unacceptable. It is disgusting to me. And he can no longer serve as governor. It's as simple as that. It's deep.
All right. Well, a little bit of a change here. We're going to talk about Cuomo for a minute because there's a lot of developments happening. That was Mayor de Blasio of New York. No pal of Cuomo. They're like nemesis. They're just some backstory there if you're not aware of that. He's calling on Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, to resign based on the most recent allegation. And just breaking as of literally 5 minutes ago, the New York Times is reporting that the latest accuser, the seventh accuser, is latest accusation against Cuomo is reported to Albany police. And I'm quoting the New York Times right now. Albany Police Department officials said on Thursday that they had been notified by the New York State Police and the governor's office about an alleged incident at the executive mansion involving Governor Cuomo and a female aide that may have risen to the level of crime, which I believe has to do with forced touching. It was Albany police officials said they heard from the state police on Wednesday night after the publication of an article in the Times Union of Albany that detailed accusations leveled by an unidentified aide to the governor who accused Mr. Cuomo of groping her at the governor's mansion where he lives last year. This is multidimensional. So I want to be as clear-headed as possible about this because there is real malfeasance with the nursing home scandal in the fact that they covered up what they deemed to be the accurate number of deaths, or the most accurate number of deaths that happened at nursing home and elder care facilities in New York State, possibly influenced by hospitals who were pushing because they wanted to remove the COVID patients and put them somewhere else because they were overbooked. But there was an actual cover up there. And that's, I think, which the crime isn't as bad as the cover up is because, you think back New York through COVID, the beginning, how these hospitals were overrun. They didn't have enough support and there was confusion and chaos. So, if the number of deaths had been reported accurately, it would have been an extraordinary tragedy. And Governor Cuomo would have had to deal with it. It wouldn't have looked good. But now it shows that he was perfectly conscious of it and more concerned with his political ratings or whatever else, or possibly some lobbyists that have supported him in the past. We don't know for sure. There's an investigation underway, 2 investigations underway. Actually, multiple. I mean, we now know that the feds are looking into it as well. But that has to do with a cover-up. Right? These are now 7 women who have come forward at a moment where, these are primarily, with exception to, I think, one person, primarily all people who've worked under Governor Cuomo in his office, in the administration. So it's not just that he has these allegations against him, and many of them are fairly recent. It's that these are all people who worked for him. And if you know anything about Cuomo's administration, big part of this is about loyalty. He has a circle around him. He uses fear tactics to keep people loyal to him. And as a result, he's been fairly protected. The Albany press isn't always the toughest on him. Neither is the New York City press, which has been extremely weakened. They report on the day-to-day, and big stories have happened where they have reported on them, like the corruption scandal involving the Buffalo Billion, which ended up leaving his closest aide in prison, and a large donor as well. So, but this is all part of the New York ecosystem. For folks who aren't aware, and I didn't really touch on this too much yesterday when we did our Cuomo story, in the last decade alone, you have seen the longtime Speaker of the Assembly, I believe he's sentenced at this point. I know he's been back and forth legally. Shelley Silver for corruption, for pay to play. The former Speaker of the Senate, Dean Scalos, the leader of the Senate, is now in jail. Malcolm Smith, former Senate leader, in jail, Democrat. Scalos is Republican. You have the previous comptroller, this was like a little bit over a decade ago, Alan Hevesi, in jail. This is, and not to mention the governors that have cycled through, whether it's Spitzer having to step down, and then, it's been, and then there are plenty of other senators as well that have ended up in a lot of trouble, whether in jail or had to pay fines or had to step down. This is the culture of Albany. It's always been very protected, and you had these leaders there for a long time using fear, using power mechanisms to prevent deep analysis and reporting and accountability. And now I think because of that movement is paved a way for a progressive movement, which is demanded, which has challenged really bad actors like the IDC, that the Democrats who were caucusing with the Republicans in New York. That was devised by Andrew Cuomo. But they have the progressive movement that has challenged them and has gotten elected, has been able to put more pressure on Cuomo in a way that maybe if this had happened 6, 7, 8 years ago, when the other players were still in control, there would have been some sort of power deal. You know, we won't touch it if you don't touch our stuff. And that's politics. In fact, that's actually how Andrew Cuomo seems he's trying to get out of this. He's trying to basically use the budget, it seems, because we're in budget. This is budget time in Albany. He's trying to use the budget as leverage for them not to go after him or call for him to resign. But as of right now, I'm looking at the latest. I believe there's, how many people have now said that he should resign? I think we have a tweet by Kayla Lacey, who's a reporter at The Intercept who comes on our show regularly. There are 55 New York State legislators that have called on Governor Cuomo to resign. That includes the leaders of the Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and Carl Hastie, who's the Assembly speaker. So this is Dick Gottfried, who is a senator. He's the longest serving lawmaker in New York State. This is no joke. This is not just progressives. There are plenty of names on that list, if we scroll down, who campaigned with Governor Cuomo, who Andrew Gennardis was endorsed by Governor Cuomo, James Skoufis, slow down just a little bit, Rachel May, she's upstate. She challenged the IDC. John Liu challenged the IDC. Robert Jackson is progressive. Michael Genaris is the deputy leader of the state Senate. So there are quite a few progressives, but there are some people on this list that are Nelly Rozick, who, are more in the center, and some have been endorsed by Governor Cuomo in the past. And I mean, this is a big deal. This is a sea change. And so what's going to happen is, if he has to step down, we don't know if he will. I think my guess is that the political pressure is growing so much that you may see somebody like a Hillary Clinton speak up, and you may start with Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator, and then go to Hillary Clinton, and then possibly Senator Schumer, and then the last shoe to drop will be President Biden. If it gets to that circle, that's where I think Andrew Cuomo's budget game, which I didn't finish that, that strategy will not work. So what he's trying to do right now is use the power of the purse strings and say, we'll pass a billionaire's tax, which is something progressive movement has been pushing for, if you lay off me. But they're not laying off. More names are coming out. And maybe that's because they think Kathy Hochul, who is the lieutenant governor, might pass the billionaire's tax. I mean, this is also really complicated because if he does step down, he has to step down in the middle of a budget negotiation process. I don't know how that works. If he's impeached, which Carl Hastie in the Assembly has already said that they're putting together the plans for that, organizing what that would look like. I believe there's only been one impeachment in New York history of a governor. It's not looking good for Governor Cuomo right now. He is up against the wall, and there's a reason why you don't make a lot of enemies. Power only works so far, right? So it's hubris. I mean, there's just so much here, and just a little more backstory for folks to know. So he has been, who's in a relationship with Sandra Lee, who is the famous TV chef. I don't know if she's a chef. Her shows. So they broke up about a year ago, I believe, or maybe a little bit over a year ago, and they were not married. So this is all kind of happening like possibly post Sandra Lee. Who knows what's going on in his head right now, but it's inappropriate behavior. If it does get physical, then this could be criminal. If it was indeed with this investigation and what the woman has said. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that all of these staffers, from what I understand, is all of the staffers have come forward and said that they went through like essentially superiors. They complained. They went to HR. They moved forward on all of these allegations, went through the process that you're supposed to go through, and they were ignored. Even senior staffers, very well known, Karen Hinton, has said that she was treated inappropriately and nothing happened. There were no consequences. This is what happens when you have leaders that are not held accountable externally and internally. when you have toxic work environments, which is they're notorious for, when you use the politics of fear rather than the politics of compassion, understanding, coalitions, allyship. This is essentially a product of the old school New York political machine, a lot of the bad habits that really have not died out. And I'm going to be as bold to even say, we have it on the progressive side too. The political machine, there were a lot of bad things about, as we talked about on the show before, Tammany Hall used really bad tactics that carried on through and still to this day are still carried out in some ways if it's legal. But, they were there to help immigrants. They were there to fight the oligarchs of the time. They were a little bit rougher about it. It doesn't mean that the oligarchs weren't stealing money, weren't doing bad things too. It was just operated differently. And, as Arun Chowdhury, who's going to come on the show right now, has said, it's bad when Tammany Hall did it, but not bad when the oligarchs did it. But with that being said, when Tammany Hall fell apart eventually after second iteration in the 60s, a lot of these tactics remained. Shelley Silver, who was the assembly speaker, was kind of like came up towards the end of Tammany Hall, like his mentors were in Tammany Hall. And so that culture remained, that legacy remained in Albany. Of course, Andrew Cuomo was a product of his father's political machine. And even if they did operate differently. So, we have to be very conscious that even if these people go away, sometimes the infrastructure or the culture still exists. And it's wonderful that we're getting more progressives elected, but we also have to look at the institutions. There are a lot of institutions in New York that still operate in an old school fear mechanic. Like it's still dirty. It's still dirty. There's a lot of backroom dealing. There's a lot of horse trading. I mean, people have asked me to talk about the mayoral race and ranked choice voting. And I say, there are a lot of really amazing candidates in that race. I'm not sure all of them are even aware that they're being backed really to boost another candidate, because ranked choice voting is really complicated. And we'll see how it plays out. A really complicated situation. It's the first ranked choice voting, a citywide election that New York has ever seen. And that happens at the end of June. So we're going to keep watching this. We are, there's a lot of interesting components to this that we haven't even touched on yet. And I don't think this would have happened if the IDC had not been defeated. So the IDC, again, were the 8 Democrats that were ousted in 2018. And if we did not have more progressives in the Senate, if we did not have Democratic leadership in the Senate willing to step up and speak out, meaning Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins and Deputy Leader Michael Gianaris, if we didn't have that groundswell of progressive senators, then the other senators wouldn't have come forward. And then that's how the political pressure is applied to people like Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer. That's how the political pressure is applied to people like Hillary Clinton, which, is still important. And Cuomo's very close. And of course, Joe Biden. All right. So we're going to talk more about this because it's not going away and it's a big story. It's huge story. Huge story. Now, if he has to step down, it will be Kathy Hochul, the Lieutenant Governor, who is a former Congresswoman from actually the district I grew up in, Buffalo. Our family's known her for years because that was, because it was Buffalo, Western New York. So that'll be interesting. We'll talk more about who Kathy Hochul is in upcoming episodes. All right, some shout outs here. We have Alan Kennedy saying Stephanie Kelton and other MMT economists, even to the left of her, those that value taxation even more, and great ones to listen to on spending. We love Stephanie, friend of the show, friend of mine. She's amazing. Kowalski from Nebraska. I'm once again in the land time forgot Central Kansas. Nothing against the people, but the Great Plains needs a second Homestead Act. Yes, we need people to run a functional society. And I want to give a shout out to our friend of the show, great union leader, Sarah Nelson. It is her birthday. Go on Twitter, wish Sarah Nelson a happy birthday. Tell her we sent you there. I'm just kidding. But just go wish her a happy birthday. She's one of our great leaders, and we're just so grateful to have her fighting for us out there. All right, Professor Hy K, we're also grateful to you. You're always in the chat, mixing it up. I think you went from YouTube to Twitch or Twitch to YouTube today. I'm impressed. That's a lot. Maybe when we hit 75K, Harvey K and I can play Among Us on Twitch. Not on Twitter. That's not where we do that. I'm not that dumb, guys. All right. Other shout outs we have here. Harvey K also says at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, he will be on The Conversation on TYT with Ben Dixon, talking about Amazon workers. That is today at 5:30 Eastern. Go check that out. That's pretty soon, actually. It's like in 20 minutes, isn't it? No, it's in an hour. All right, who else do we have here? Big thank you to MIDI-Docs and Mario for working those algorithms. And of course, our YouTube moderators, Bob C, Choke and the Orb, and Chuck Diesel. And as always, on Twitch, Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, and Nug Wrangler. Thank you for keeping the chat rooms troll-free. Send us your addresses. I'm not getting them. The Nomiki Show at gmail.com. I'm going to send out a bunch of swag. I want to send it to you. Thank you. All right, we'll see you at 3 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and YouTube. And to our patrons, thanks for always checking us out. I know a few of you have been messaging me about how you listen to our show in your morning walk. I think that's pretty cool. All right, thank you, everybody. Stay in solidarity.